Today, we're diving into a story from 19th century America that I promise you is going to stick with you. It's a true account pieced together from old records and letters, and it really forces you to ask some tough questions about loyalty, debt, and what it actually means to be free.
The story opens with this idea that some relationships are just so complicated, so tangled up, that you can't easily explain them. And that really gets to the heart of what we're talking about today. Two men whose lives became tied together by something much more powerful and a whole lot darker than just ownership.
So, at the center of all this, you've got two men. First, there's Marcus Hartwell. He's the master of a failing plantation in North Carolina, a guy who's drowning in debt and just seems to have the worst luck in the world. And then there's Caleb, who was born into slavery on that very same land. On paper, it's simple, right? Master and slave. But in reality, their relationship became this incredibly complex dance where one man legally owned the other, but the other held the power over his life.
So, how did this whole bizarre relationship even begin? Well, it all started with a single violent moment. And that moment changed everything, kicking off a debt that would last for over 20 years.
Okay, picture this. It's July 1842. Marcus is out inspecting his land near a swampy part of the river. His horse spooks, throws him, and he lands stunned in the mud. And right there, an eastern cottonmouth is coiled, ready to strike. He sees the snake, its mouth open, and then, out of absolutely nowhere, Caleb appears. He grabs a fallen branch and kills the snake just a split second before it bites.
Now this is where it gets really smart. When Marcus asks Caleb why he was even there, why he'd followed him, Caleb doesn't say it was out of loyalty or concern. No, he gives this incredibly clever answer. He basically frames it as self-interest. He says, look, if you die, the plantation gets sold off, and all of us, including me, get separated and sold down the river. It was the perfect thing to say, because it was an explanation a master could understand and accept without it challenging the social order. Just brilliant.
But here's the thing. That snake bite, it wasn't a one-time fluke. It was just the beginning of this unbelievable pattern of near-death experiences for Marcus and last-second rescues by Caleb. It's almost hard to believe.
I mean, the pace of these things is just unreal. A few months after the snake, a fire breaks out in a barn. Caleb is the one who organizes the bucket brigade and saves the main house. Another time, a horse bolts, heading for a cliff. Caleb grabs the reins. He saves Marcus from food poisoning, from choking on a piece of meat, and even from an attack by a couple of rogue Confederate deserters. It was like death was personally stalking Marcus Hartwell, and Caleb was his full-time bodyguard.
Over a span of 23 years, Caleb saved Marcus's life 18 times. 18. Just let that sink in for a second. 18 different moments where, if Caleb hadn't been there, Marcus's story would have been over. The debt that Marcus owed him was becoming, well, unpayable.
And this weird dependency, it had a huge social cost for Marcus. After the choking incident, Marcus's own brother-in-law insisted that Caleb be whipped for daring to put his hands on a white man. And Marcus just explodes. He chooses Caleb over his own family, yelling, "He saved my life! Get out of my house!" You just didn't do that. It broke every social rule, and pretty soon Marcus and his family were basically outcasts.
Well, the weight of this massive, unpayable debt just becomes too much for Marcus to handle. So, one night in 1846, full of gratitude and probably a good bit of whiskey, he makes a promise. A promise that would define the next 20 years of both of their lives.
And the deal he lays out is actually pretty specific. He tells Caleb, you give me 20 more years of loyal service, and in return, I'll give you your freedom and $4,000, which was an absolute fortune back then. It was a real, tangible path to a new life. But here's the fatal flaw. The whole thing, the entire promise, it was just his word. He says he'll get the lawyers to draw it up, but he never does. It's all just talk. And you can really see how trapped Marcus feels here. In this quote from a letter to his wife, Catherine, he's trying to explain this bond to her. He knows, he is completely aware that Caleb is the only reason his family even has a husband and a father. But that awareness, it doesn't lead to action, just a promise for someday. So time rolls on, decades pass, the Civil War happens, slavery is abolished, and that 20-year term from the promise, it's finally up. It is time for Marcus to pay his debt. So on May 18th, 1865, 3 years late by the way, Marcus calls Caleb into his office. He hands him his official manumission papers and tells him the $4,000 is sitting in a bank account in Wilmington waiting for him. After 23 long years, it seems like the promise has actually been kept. With these words, Marcus seems to finally close the books on this massive debt. Caleb is 47 years old, he's got his freedom, he's got his money, he's got his whole life ahead of him. It really feels like this should be the end of the story. But it's not. Because Marcus had a secret, a truly horrifying secret. Before he freed Caleb, he had already arranged to sell him to a trader from Mississippi. The deal was set to go through on May 23rd, just 5 days later. The plan was an absolute gut punch of a betrayal. Give Caleb the illusion of freedom, just to have him captured and sold right back into slavery.
What happens next is just this rapid, dramatic collapse. After Caleb is gone, Marcus is apparently hit with a massive crisis of conscience. He takes the bill of sale for Caleb and throws it in the fire, making him legally, truly free. But just days later, irony strikes. Marcus comes down with a deadly case of typhoid fever. Delirious with fever, he starts screaming for Caleb, absolutely convinced his savior will show up one last time. And according to the story, Caleb was still nearby. He was hiding out, and he heard the calls. And for the first time in 23 years, he made a choice. He turned around, and he walked away. And with that, the bond was finally, truly broken. Marcus died. But what about Caleb? What happens to a man who spent his entire life as a guardian, only to vanish into history?
We'll never know for sure. It's one of the great tragedies of this story. The money Marcus left for him in that bank account, it was never touched. Some people think he made his way to Philadelphia and lived a long, free life. Others say he lived like a hermit in the woods, haunted, and some fear he was captured anyway and sold, just like Marcus originally planned. The truth is, we just don't know.
After Marcus died, they found his private ledger. He'd kept a secret record of all 18 times Caleb had saved him, and on the very last page, he wrote this. It's just this moment of devastating self-awareness. At the very end, Marcus finally understood the incredible cost of his own survival and the kind of life he had forced Caleb to lead in order to keep him safe.
And that really brings us back to the central question, doesn't it? What is the price of freedom? For Caleb, was it just about not having chains on his wrists, or was true freedom something more? Maybe the ultimate price he had to pay was making that final, awful choice. The choice to finally let his protector/captor face death alone, and to finally be able to say, "Your life is not my burden anymore."